Morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. We are excited to have you as we talk about the project we've been working on for the past few years, Measure OER Effectiveness with Lifelong Learning Competencies. I am Jamie Holmes, and I'm a reference and instruction librarian at Tulsa Community College. And a large part of my duties include supporting our faculty in their OER work. I have been lucky enough to work with some awesome teammates over the past few years. Our team lead is Marla Lobley. She is the project coordinator based out of East Central University here in Oklahoma. And Kathy Essmiller is the coordinator for Open OK State and the OER librarian at Oklahoma State University. Again, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. So as you may have read in the abstract, this is the third of 3 Open Ed presentations on this project. It was a 3-year IMLS funded project investigating and investigating the possibility of, and then creating and validating a survey to measure OER in regards to their ability to impact lifelong learning competencies. And we had an excellent plan. Marla is detail-oriented and did wonderfully. That was structured over the 3 years. So if you're considering an IMLS grant that's a multi-year grant, reach out to Marla Lobley because she structured it really, really well. And she's got how to apply and how to implement it nailed down. And then we were fortunate to be able to practice flexibility over the course of the 3 years and have IMLS's support to make the shifts that we needed to ask and find answers to the questions that we had put forth. So our first step was to conduct a literature review. And this was, I think, 2019, 2020. And so we felt pretty solid with our familiarity with the OER literature, although we did keep on top of it as new work was published throughout the course of the grant. And kind of the impetus for this was the Hilton piece that was published in 2019, that it was a systematic review. I think he probably puts one out every 3 or 4 years, which is so helpful. But one of his findings was that research published by librarians kind of followed, I'm trying to think of it's less systematic maybe, and follows a different level of research rigor than other disciplines expect to be able to have communicated. That was a lot of words to say. Librarian research is not always communicated the same way that other disciplines are. And so we wanted to come up with an easy way for librarians to implement a research project in their own house that would not be a huge lift, but that would provide results that could be communicated out in ways that resonate with how other disciplines communicate their work out. And so the literature review, we based it on the generative theory of something, education, communication. Marla will clear that up in a little bit. And then we did a lot of research into what constituted creating a quantitative metric for analysis, for collection of data and collection analysis of data. So we mostly did that during the first year. We also were reviewing the nature of lifelong learning and what lifelong learning competencies had been widely accepted, and then what ones we wanted to incorporate into our work. And then the next step was open drafting of items. And this is where the community, oh my gosh, was so fantastic. And I think the fact that we had gone online by this time strengthened this project. We were able to present at so many open conferences, and we put the questions we were working on out there to the community and invited their feedback. And because things were online, we were able to put this work in front of people from across the globe. And we got some fascinating cultural input as well. Some of the questions that maybe we would have felt, yeah, those are solid here in the Midwest or the South or whatever we are. But as we talk to people from across the nation and across the world, learning how some of those questions would land in different cultures, I think really, really, really strengthened our ability to create a survey that can be used. You know, I hesitate to say anywhere, but a survey that was developed with some heightened awareness that we wouldn't have had without those opportunities to contextualize it across so many different cultures. And Open Ed Camp, that conference in particular, if you haven't heard about that, I think if you Google it, it'll pop up. It's not a camp. It's not a campground. It's a style of conference. But and then so we had the expert analysis and student feedback. Once we come to the list of questions, constructs, Marla's going to clean this all up with the right words in a minute. But we had some students test it for usability and to see whether or not it made sense. And then we had brought in some experts in survey development and had them give us some feedback. And then we did a round of testing for validity and reliability. And then we are finishing up a final round of testing that has been part of our nimble, reactive, no, not reactive, reflexive, dynamic, responsive, there's the word, processes we've gotten to implement. So I'm going to toss it to Marla to provide some clarification on this.
Thank you, Kathy. So really things went to plan for the most part for steps 1 through 3. The testing for validity and reliability is where we reach the point in research where things don't go as intended all the time. So if you're doing a research project and it's not going how you intended, it's normal, it's okay. So we struggled at first. Well, actually, Jamie is going to go through kind of in detailed some things that we did that we don't want you to have. We want you to learn from our experiences. We don't want you to have to make the same mistakes. So Jamie is going to go through that in the following slides.
So when you're trying to create a survey, what could go wrong? Here's what happened in a nutshell. One thing that we noticed after our first round is that there were a lot of straight line answers where every answer was A or every answer was B. And it's really not likely that would have been an honest and earnest attempt at taking the survey. So what we did for the next round is we included a quality control question that would allow us to very quickly and easily determine had that respondent actually read the questions or not. And so that we could toss those invalid responses out. We also, next slide, Marla. We had some items that we duplicated intentionally. We thought that would be a good way to sort of test for, again, whether they were earnestly answering the questions, reading them and answering them honestly. And so we would have an item worded negatively, and then a little bit later down the survey, we have it worded positively. And what we determined was that was not working well. We had to do a little bit of research on cognitive load, and the more complicated you make the questions, the more difficult it is for the student or the respondent to answer accurately, I guess is what we were going for. So we decided that it would be a bad idea to mix that positive and negative wording, and so we stuck with all positively worded questions in order to reduce a little bit of that load. But we found, partway through the study or the project, that we needed to do a little bit more learning and research on our own, and that's kind of how we reacted to improve that part of the project. We also, we were performing a confirmatory factor analysis on the draft survey. So we had a lot of items, 70 to 80 items. And we discovered that we didn't actually have enough responses to perform a valid CFA. And so the shorter survey that we created and ran at one point was not actually scientifically valid. And so we learned from that we could reduce the number of items. We would consider smaller and more immediate incentives for students. So rather than answer the survey, get your name in a drawing to maybe win this, we decided to make it a smaller prize, but give more of them and a sure thing if you participated. We also we also added an identifier that would allow us to potentially run this over multiple semesters in order to gather enough responses, and then that identifying question allowed us to eliminate if we did have duplication, so that would be a more reliable measure. And then, finally, this is kind of underlying all of this. We had made some decisions in our project, in our study, that were based on incorrect assumptions and things we didn't know. And so really great advice that we would share with everybody is always make sure that you're partnering with the right kind of specialist in the right kind of instrument creation that you're trying to work with.
Thank you, Jamie. So we will have these slides uploaded for you shortly after this presentation, and you'll be able to follow this link to actually see the survey that we are testing right now. It is longer than our ideal survey will be. I think it's around 70 items right now, which takes about 15 minutes to complete. Our goal is between 20 and 30 items, including the demographic questions, and so that would be about 5 minutes to complete. But you can click this link and see our live survey, and this link will actually let you copy it in Microsoft Forms and use it as is. If you have a different software that you would like to use, we have all of the questions and kind of their background and how they emerged out of the literature review in this Excel sheet here. So this Excel sheet, we'll actually just look at it because it might be confusing if you're seeing it for the first time. So here I have listed all of the competencies that are measured and how many questions are in the pilot test or the current version of the survey. On the items tab, this is where you can see the domain that the question is in, the competency it measures, the definition of that competency, how we originally worded the item for testing, what feedback we got from experts or students, and then how we revised the item, and then finally what was the final item in the pilot test. So you can still see we had some negatively worded items in this column. How did we change those to a positively worded item over here? And then you can see all of the research that we used on the citations tab. So if you are more of a research nerd like me, that could be interesting to you. Okay, let me get back. Then we have completed an exploratory factor analysis, which is one of the two main tests that you do to make sure a survey is valid and reliable, or to gather data on the validity and reliability of a survey or an instrument. So you can see our data from our project website, and once we have the confirmatory factor analysis data ready, it will also go on the website. We really want this project to be as open as possible, not just in the creation, but also in sharing the data, other people using the de-identified data, using the survey. If you want to, you have the expertise, do your own CFA and EFA on the survey that we have now and see if you get similar results to ours. We very much want to be contributing to the conversation. So if you would like to sign up to be notified when the final survey is ready, you can click that link here in the copy of the slides that we will upload just after this presentation. And Kathy, I believe you were going to cover this slide.
Yes, and I kind of dipped into that, and we've got some questions, Marla, too, that I want to make sure we leave time to answer, because that I think you and Jamie are particularly positioned to answer. But so these are some of the lifelong learning competencies that we landed on. And if you we've got a couple different presentations that go into detail about how we arrived at these and the other ones that are selected. So if you're curious about these, we usually talk about it like in the middle of the presentation, so you can find those and look through them. But this in particular is where we brought the community in to help us kind of hone them. And there's some fascinating, and so email Marla for more about this. There's some fascinating angles at which people come into lifelong learning competencies. And now, like at the Lillehammer Lifelong Learning Conference, there's kind of shifting to including the phrase workforce skills along with lifelong learning competencies. And so there's some different, I don't want to say schools of thought, but there's some different pots that these kind of are approached from. One from how to be a humanist view, and one from kind of a Western work skills centered kind of way. And so we kind of tried to, what we landed on was learning to learn kind of is the goal we were working towards. And so that's the direction we leaned. And then the cultural input we got, as well as the expert input we got from lifelong learning experts, went a long ways towards helping us craft these and word them. Does that capture it pretty well, Marla?
Yes, I think so. Sorry, I clicked I clicked through too soon.
No, that's okay. And I surprised you.
Yes, and I definitely want to make sure we have time for questions. This is our contact information, the link to our project website, and then of course our acknowledgement from IMLS, the funders of this project. So I would like to, if you have a question, please put it in the chat or the Q&A, and we will catch it. I'm gonna take a look at the Q&A.
And Marla, maybe can you grab the project website real quick? Abby asked for that in the chat. And
Yeah.
where we are kind of right now is we're in just the final stage of developing the survey, of validating it, the construct analysis. And so we haven't run it yet as an experimental research project. That's going to happen in the final semester. Where we added time was in this survey validation with numbers and things like that. And then so the final, we anticipate having the final toolkit ready to roll in fall or spring of next year. And the idea is that it's essentially a pamphlet. So we were talking yesterday, it's not like a Troy built toolkit cabinet. Our idea is that an OER librarian can, in 10 minutes, kind of get this pulled together and ready to roll and then analyze it. So it's more of a couple of it's an IKEA toolkit for research, that this way you don't have to go validate the survey and do a bunch of, you've got it like kind of like all we're dealing with Bliss's surveys, right? About student perceptions and faculty perceptions. So anyway, okay, the Q&A questions.
So Jonathan asks, what methods did you use to ensure continuity between semesters for students whose contact information might change? So we did not initially have any identifying information on our survey, because we wanted to try to create something that would be easy to get IRB approval for at other institutions. We learned later, after talking to an instrument creation specialist, that we could not combine data from different semesters without some kind of identifying thing to be able to eliminate duplicates. So we did not use any, for our research, like the analysis, we didn't use any combined data from between semesters. So the having to have continuity and contact information wasn't as much of an issue. I'm not sure, Jonathan, like if that doesn't answer your question, feel free to put another one. Jessica Cerny, did you have better luck using quantitative questions instead of qualitative, or vice versa? So all of our questions, it's a quantitative survey, just because that is the most straightforward to analyze, so that the survey could be used at other institutions. It takes a special expertise to analyze qualitative responses appropriately. I think it would be fascinating for someone to take this and maybe turn it into a qualitative survey. The biggest taste of that we got was in the student focus group, where we had the students read over the questions and then talk about, like, okay, how do you interpret this question, and make sure that how they were interpreting it was what we were intending. And they had some really great comments and reflections on how they learned. And I think even just taking the survey, if it was converted into somewhat of a qualitative survey, just the fact of reflecting on how you learn could be a teaching tool in itself. So that would be a fascinating way for someone to extend this study. Okay, so thank you, Jonathan. How was the survey distributed? How would you recontact participants later in life to ask about continued learning to learn? Right. So a very common way to study lifelong learning is longitudinally. So over time, you repeat a certain instrument over time because it is lifelong learning. What we were measuring specifically was the competencies for lifelong learning. So do you have the underlying skills and behaviors and knowledge base to become a lifelong learner? So with the competencies, you can measure at a single point in time, and of course you can measure longitudinally also. To distribute the survey, we worked with faculty members that we asked to put out the survey in their courses. For the purposes of the grant, we stuck with faculty who only used non-commercial materials. And then through the grant, we were able to give them funds to convert a course. If they had a commercial course that they wanted to convert to non-commercial, they could do that for this survey, for participating in this project. So that's kind of how we use some of the grant funds. Any other questions that have come through the chat? I have not been keeping up with the chat.
I have, Marla, and giving long answers, which probably invite people to quit asking questions. Oh wait, Nancy, I don't know if let me skim yours. Exploration of, okay, so for those of you who are just watching on your phone or whatever, Nancy O'Neill is curious about the exploration of the efficacy of OER increasing lifelong learning. Seems to me that this would be dependent on how the OER is used in the teaching learning context. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts about a question that I visit often. Is it the OER per se, or is it the use of OER? And that is the golden, that's a great question. Like, how does it impact the teaching? This, so far, we've been developing and validating the survey. And the research question this asks is, does the use of OER impact lifelong learning competencies? And so we haven't even gone the next step to, like, does it improve? Does it have a negative impact? It's just, is there an impact? We're just getting away from that null question. And then next steps that researchers could take is to dive into those explorations that you're talking about, or include some of the stories, some of the qualitative questions. So this is just, we're just working a basic survey that says, is there an impact? Yeah.
And Kathy,
I think that'd be great.
I think there's an opportunity to extend this research. I switched back to this slide listing some of the competencies. You could use the survey and these competencies to reflect on, like, am I teaching this skill in my class, or are my assignments like promoting the development of this attitude or this skill? So that kind of speaks to that and opens up the whole other conversation about, is it the OER, or is it all the teaching changes that come with using an OER?
We're mostly trying to provide a way to get away from grades and DFW. Yeah, sorry, Jamie.
No, well, and I was going to add that running the survey in a course that used all OER, one thing we did consider also is removing that variable of socioeconomic. We were taking away ability to pay for a textbook. And again, I think that was a little premature. That's something that would be studied down the road, I think. I just want to add that.
I want to thank Marla and Kathy and Jamie. They've presented a great research project and really embraced the OER mentality of giving us lots to think about and potentially remix and reuse and reallocate and redistribute amongst ourselves and our institutions. And so we are at about a minute before the end. So there are a few more questions that have come into the chat. At the end of the time, I will stop the recording, but we can stay in the room as long as we like to finish the conversation.
Thank you, Nicole. So we're happy to hang out, answer more questions if you want, and happy to share blueprints, and excited to see this built on. One of the things we definitely found is that the 3 hours of research methodology we get in librarianship school invites us to make sure we have a quantitative survey research specialist on board. So
Somebody just said in the chat, portfolios to document and share lifelong learning. That's a great idea. Kathy asks, did you do this survey at a past open conference? Well, we've presented our progress throughout the last two, I believe, and then a few of the other OE Global. Kathy, you mentioned the one with camping in it, but I forgot what that was called.